In this video, we are going to explore how to use your graphing calculator to perform a linear regression and find a line of best fit. Now, this video is going to cover a lot of different calculator skills, so you may only need parts of it depending on the needs of your class and what you'd like to view in the graphing window. For any linear regression, we have to start by entering the data into the calculator. While this is going to feel like a very tedious process, it's obviously important because the calculator needs the data in order to perform the operations. So we start by going to the Stat button. And in the Stat menu, our very first option says Edit. And on that option, we're going to press Enter. And you are met with the lists of the calculator. The lists of the calculator are exactly what they sound like. They are locations in the calculator where you can enter lists of data. You do not designate them as X and Y. You do that later on. You can enter the data into any lists you want and call up any of those lists that you want. But for the purposes of this exercise, I've entered the data into list 1 and list 2. So we have, this is going to be our independent variable in list 1, this is our X, and then this is going to be our dependent variable, our Y, in list 2. I've already entered them in to save a little bit of time, but all you need to do is arrow over to a particular column, just type the number in and press enter. If you happen to make a mistake, you have two ways of fixing your mistake. Well, so let's say I want to get rid of the number 19. If I do not like that 19 and I accidentally hit the wrong button, you actually have to use the delete button, not the clear button, in order to get rid of that 19. So the delete button is right here next to the left arrow. So if you want to get rid of that 19, you actually have to click delete, not clear. Clear will only get rid of what you are currently typing. In most situations, it only gets rid of what you are currently typing, not something that's already stored there. The other way that you could get rid of it is, and I'm not going to do this because it would create a lot more work, is if you arrow up to the title of the list. So in this case, it's list 1. You'll see that I have all of the numbers here, all populated into the list, 0, 5, 9, 13, 17, 19. If you want to wipe the entire list at once, here you can press clear. And this is one of the few situations where you can use the clear button to not clear something you're currently typing. So you would actually press the clear button. I do not recommend pressing the delete button here, as that will delete your entire list. It will just eliminate list 1 from the calculator. And we certainly don't want to do that because that would require some fancy maneuvering to get list 1 back in, and just be very careful with that. So if you want to erase an entire list, you go up to the title of the list and press clear. If you want to erase a specific entry, you go to that entry and press delete, and it will delete that specific entry. Okay, so let's actually get to the part of this that's the linear regression. I have my numbers in list 1 and list 2. So I'm going to go back into the Stat menu, and this time I'm going to arrow over once to Calc. And you'll notice that on the Calc screen, you have two different linear regression options. You have the linear regression AX plus B and the linear regression A plus BX. For the sake of consistency across our different modes of linear regression, namely Desmos and actually what we're also familiar with slope-intercept form, we're going to use option number 4. We're going to keep everything consistent and have that slope, that A, directly in front of that X. So we're going to scroll down and choose option number 4. When you come to option number 4, you are met with a variety of different available characteristics of the linear regression. We're going to leave our X list as list 1 and our Y list as list 2. In the event that you need to change those, you can press second, and then if you look down on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 keys, those are all of the different lists that you can call up. So if I needed to change something to list 3, for example, maybe I put a third variable in there, you could do that. But for right now, we're going to leave those as list 1 and list 2 because that's what we have them as. The frequency list changes the frequency of some of the outcomes. We're not interested in doing that. We typed everything in separately, so we're going to leave that. I'm going to come back to store in just a minute. We're going to do this again, and let's just arrow down and press calculate. So here is the slope, that is A. Here is the intercept, that is B. And here is my R, that is the correlation coefficient. Now, it is entirely likely that when you opened your calculator and you use this operation for the first time, that you do not have R squared and R visible to you. If you had recently reset your calculator for whatever reason, cleared the memory, you lose R squared and R. To get those back, you have to go into the mode of the calculator. So if you click mode, and you're going to go all the way down to the bottom where it says stat diagnostics. Yours is likely on. You want to switch it to off. Or I'm sorry, yours is likely on off and you want to switch it to on. You want to make sure that your statistics diagnostics are on. That is the way of telling the calculator, I would like to see more of the background information. There's other types of regressions that use R squared. The calculator will report R squared for those. And there are other types of and specifically for linear regression, you'll see both R squared and R. So you want to make sure that when you're scrolling down, that you're seeing that as being on. Now, when all of the information is in the calculator and the two sets of data are in the calculator, the bivariate data is in the calculator, you may want to look at the scatter plot. If you simply press graph, you're not going to see the scatter plot. You have to tell the calculator specifically, I want to see the data that I just plotted, or the data, I want to see a plot of the data that I just entered. And in order to do that, you actually have to go into stat plot. So if you look up here in stat plot, which is the secondary option of y equals, that's where we're going to go next. So we're going to say second y equals, and we're going to use plot number 1. So we're going to press enter on plot number 1. We're going to turn this on. We're going to leave it as a scatter plot. Our X list is the first list. Our Y list is the second list. You can change the mark. Change the mark, how it's going to appear in the graph. And our color is, we can change the color to different options. So if I turn on plot 1, now I can press graph and you'll see my 1 point. That is the point 0.8.2. That is the only one that I can see because I am still sitting in the standard window. I haven't changed the window or adjusted the window to see all of those points. If I wanted to see all of my points, it would be a chore to try to set my own window. The calculator actually has a zoom function built specifically for this moment. So if you click zoom, after you're here, if you click zoom, as you might imagine, we're going to arrow down to option number 9, which is zoom stat. Zoom stat tells the calculator, I want you to look at the statistics that are currently being plotted, and I want you to build a window around those statistics. And you're going to see that the calculator does actually a pretty good job of building a window around those statistics. It gets a little weird on some of the axes. You have to be careful with some of the scales that it uses, but it certainly does a nice job of showing me all 6 of the points. It gives me a little bit of a buffer on the outside, so I don't have a point right up against the edge. And it goes all the way from the first point, that one we saw before at 0.8.2, all the way to the last one at 19, 61.8. And if you wanted to, you could trace through those points. You can click trace, and you can see each one of them by arrowing through them. And there's 19, 61.8. And you can see them there. Now, if we've gone through the trouble of figuring out the linear regression, and we've gone through the trouble of figuring out the equation, we probably want to graph it against this line. Now, there's 2 ways to do that. I'm sorry, against this data. There's 2 ways to do that. You could go into y equals, and you could manually enter the information that you have. Whatever linear regression reported as the slope, and whatever linear regression reported as the equation, or as the intercept, excuse me. You could manually enter that information. The alternative to that is to let the calculator do it for you. And you might remember, we're going to go back into the stat menu now. You might remember that in the stat menu, when we were doing linear regression, so we're going to arrow over once to calc and then down to linear regression, there was one option that I told you to temporarily skip for now, and that was the store regeq. Store regeq is, where do you want me to store the regression equation? That's what that's really asking you. I would love to store it so that I could graph it. And in order to do that, we have to tell the calculator to store the regression equation in y1. It's a little bit of a dance to get to where y1 is. You would think you would just press y equals and that would be it. But the truth is that we can't just call it up like that. There's no way to take it right from that y equals window and then call it up to here. What we actually have to do instead is go into this option right here, which is vars. So obviously short for variables. So we're going to go in here, and then we're going to arrow over once to y, and we're going to choose the function. So again, that was VARS, the var is the variable key. We're going to arrow over once to y vars, and we're going to choose option number 1, which is function. And this is where we call up y1. So we press enter on the y1. It is now stored. It will now store that equation in there. We press enter. Here's my linear regression, same exact answers that we got before because of the same data set. Now if I look in y equals, it has stored the equation in there for me. Yes, it carried all of those horrible decimal points. It didn't round. We would have rounded. There was no reason for us to type all of that out. The accuracy is not going to be that much greater if we rounded. And then we press graph, and here comes the line. Now, it's a little bit harder in the graphing calculator because you have less control over the zooming to see those residuals that we talked about in the line of best fit video. And if you need a refresher on what a residual is, I encourage you to go back and watch that. But it's a little bit harder to see those differences here. That's okay. We're limited by the technology that we have. We can see that all 6 of the points are off the line. 3 of them are above and 3 of them are below. That's a coincidence, not a necessity. And we get a nice look at the line as compared to the data points. And it does exactly what we expected. Our R was very close to 1. So we should have expected it to be very close, the points to be pretty close to the line. All that being said, we talked a lot about the linear regression functions of the calculator. We talked about where to enter the data. We talked about how to graph a scatter plot. We talked about how to adjust the window to see all of the points of the scatter plot. We talked about how to turn on statistics diagnostics so that you can actually see R and R squared. We talked about how to calculate the regression line and then get the regression line on the graph with the points of the scatter plot. The calculator has all of those functions in there. You just have to know where to look for them. So if at any point you forget how to find something or where something is, feel free to revisit the video and watch again.